Tell me about your background. How did you get to where you are now?
Wow, that's going a ways back. Well, let's see. My undergraduate preparation is in health and physical education, and when I graduated from Wayne State University in Detroit, my first job was teaching at a brand new high school, a private school outside of Detroit. And I was there for 9 years, and I coached girls basketball, and I started a track and field program while I was there. And I really enjoyed the place. There were a lot of great people, but I was looking for a little bit more of a challenge. And so I decided to go seek that. And I come from a blue-collar, working-class family. We couldn't afford to send me away to school, so I lived at home while I attended Wayne State. So I was looking at a university with a residential college.
Mm-hmm.
My competitive experience at Wayne State was in fencing. That's how I competed. And I was among the first group who started the first women's fencing program at Wayne State, and actually among many of the schools. And so I knew Notre Dame as a very good top-level fencing program. And Notre Dame had just started to admit women as undergraduates. So I went over there and I said, hey, you looking for a fencing coach? And they said, nah, Mike's doing a fine job coaching both the men and women. So, but would you like to, we're bringing up tennis as a varsity status. Would you like to coach the tennis team? And I went, sure. Well, they found somebody with a little more qualifications coaching the tennis team. But a year later, she left. So they called me and said, well, now we're bringing up women's basketball to varsity status. The tennis coach left, and we've got a lot of fencing classes in the physical education program. Are you interested? And I said, sure. So I was hired in 1977 to be the first women's varsity basketball coach and coach tennis and teach in the physical education department. So that's how I got there.
Okay.
And then over the years, after the third year, well, actually after the second year of doing all of this, I was getting a little exhausted.
No kidding.
Tennis started out as a fall sport, and then we were starting to pick up a few spring tournaments. Well, if we're going to play in the spring, we're going to have to train during the winter. And in the winter, I was coaching basketball, in addition to teaching, all the physical education classes that was on my schedule. So I decided probably I had better give up the tennis program. We had another woman coming into the department, and she took over my tennis program, and I stuck with basketball. And then in the third year of my basketball program, we did make it. We were AIAW then, and we made it to the Sweet 16 that year, and that was my last year. Digger Phelps took over the program, and the administration decided to take it full-time Division I. We were Division III. And so they offered full scholarships, hired a whole new coaching staff, and I got my tennis team back. So I went back to the tennis program and coached that for a few more years. We moved up from Division III to Division II. And one of the things I'm really proud of my players, we were Division II. We had only 2 scholarships. Division II was allowed 4 scholarships. We were still competing. I could create my own schedule, and we were competing against Big Ten schools who had full scholarships. And for many in the Big Ten, we were beating them. So I was pretty proud of that. But have I ever told you about the Notre Dame story? The Northwestern story?
I don't believe so.
The Northwestern tennis story. Well, Northwestern was on my schedule when I took the job, but from the previous year to that year, they decided to go Division I, 8 full scholarships, recruited some really top players. I still had no scholarships. So women's tennis at that time, we were playing 6 singles, 3 dubs, and so a total of 9 matches. Mm-hmm. And the first time we played them, we didn't win a match. We didn't win a set. We didn't win a game.
Wow.
6-0 all the way down the board. So my friends were saying, well, you're not going to schedule Northwestern again, are you? And I said, oh, yes, I am. But our goal for next year is everybody has to win 1 game. And then it got to the point where our goal was to win a set. So in my last year, we did play Northwestern. We now had 2 scholarships. They still had 8, a well-established program. We finished singles, splitting singles, went into dubs, and all 3 dubs, split sets. We eventually lost 5-4, but we had made considerable progress, and I was very proud of them. And then that year, we ended up second in the nation in Division II. And
so, second in the nation in tennis, and a National Tennis Coach of the Year.
Yes.
A 20-win season for your basketball team.
Right.
Yet you left all that behind to be a sports psychology consultant.
I'd always had an interest in the psychology of sport from the time I was coaching in high school. And it seemed as my career at Notre Dame was going towards administration, I was offered an assistant athletic directorship to work with Gene Corrigan. And that's just not my passion. My passion is teaching and coaching. So with my interest in the psychology of performance, I made the decision to leave Notre Dame and pursue a doctorate in sports psychology, and that's what brought me here to Charlottesville to study with Bob Rotella and Linda Bunker in sports psychology here at the University of Virginia.
You used the word passion. I would imagine that the people that seek you out have a similar strong passion for what it is that they do. I think that helps you relate with your clients a little bit more. Does that help?
It does. My passion is helping people, and a particular environment that I think I can relate well is the sport environment, because I've spent just about all my professional career in that environment in one role or another. So I think I understand the athlete. You know, in addition to getting my doctorate in sports psychology, I pursued a career as a professional counselor. And I used to do some training seminars when I worked over at the University Counseling Center to young professionals coming in, to give them an idea of how they might better work with student athletes that came in, and to get an understanding that the sport for these student athletes is not just a game. It's so much a part of their whole life, and that needs to be honored. And I think, so I understand their culture, I understand the mentality of striving for excellence, and I totally support that. And the exciting thing about working with athletes or performing artists is that after working with them, I can go watch them perform. And when they succeed, and you can see the excitement, especially in their face, and the smile on their face, and the satisfaction of taking their game to the next level, that really fuels me, that excites me, that keeps me going, that's what stimulates me. I love it.
If there was something that you could have people know about you or your practice at head coaching, what would that be?
Well, one is my passion, and I love helping people, and I can get excited about and get into their story and into their life, and really, I want to help them. The other thing is that no matter what sport or what activity they want to excel in, like what did I know about opera singing? What do I know about singing? One of the more interesting ones, I had a phone call from a professional bass fisherman, and when he called for just this first introduction, he said, I have a hunch that you may not know a lot about bass fishing. And I said, you're absolutely right. And he said, well, it's a lot about golf. You know, I'm out on the water for a long period of time. So I know about performance. I know about striving for excellence. I know how we need to think in order to get to that place. So no matter what your sport is, what your activity is, then I think I can help you, because I want to listen to your story. And I'm going to ask the questions that I think I'm skilled in to get your story out and look for the areas that you need help in.
Very good. Well, speaking of stories, we're going to turn the page.
Okay.
Notre Dame admitted women for the first time in 1972. You were hired in 1977 as the first women's varsity basketball head coach. There had to have been pressure to win right out of the gate. Was there?
You know, not really from the administration. We were so new as women, and then women athletes. Sometimes they didn't quite know what to do with us. So I think it was incumbent upon me and my team and my volunteer assistant coaches. I had Bob Scott was a law school student who played some basketball in his day, and he volunteered to be my assistant coach. And Bob and I would drive the vans through the winters in Indiana. And I clearly remember one of the vans, when you remove the rubber mat under the accelerator, there was a rusted hole in the floor of the van. So we weren't flying anywhere. But again, I've always been about excellence. So that's what I was striving for, taking it one game at a time, one season at a time. You know, I didn't have a secretary, I didn't have a recruiting budget. So it was just, what could I do today, and then what could I do the next day to take this program to the next level and perform as well as we could. So again, there really wasn't a whole lot of pressure to do well, but that's the way I work. I want to do well and as best I can.
Tell me about December 3rd, 1977.
December 3rd, 1970. Was that our first game?
I think it was.
Against Valparaiso.
Yep.
Yeah. In their purple gym.
On your home court.
Pardon me?
On your home court.
On our home court. Well, it doesn't get much more exciting. You've seen that court on television for many years, and all of a sudden, we're there.
What was it like just to walk out onto the court for your very first game as the head coach? I mean, was there a, what the heck am I doing here moment? Or
a little bit of that, but then again, you have so much to pay attention to. I used to remember in those early years, it was kind of difficult to sing the national anthem because of the anxiety that I was experiencing. Okay. But again, we didn't have you know, if we had a couple hundred people in the stands, that would be a lot. In fact, it was interesting. We took the team to the University of Illinois, and we drove up, and I don't know if you've ever been to that arena, but much like Michigan's football arena, the majority of the arena is below ground. So when we drive our cars up and we enter the door, we're basically at the top of the arena. And we walked in, and it was like the basketball court looked like a postage stamp. So anyway, the kids got a little nervous about that. We got them dressed, we got started. I didn't know it was a doubleheader. In those years, we used to do that to attract more spectators for the women's game. They would play in front of the men's game. So we had a few more than we usually had at home. We had a few more people in the stands, but we went into the locker room at halftime and came out, and now we have thousands of people there. So that was another kind of, what is going on? So trying to keep the players' focus on the game, that the fact that the court's still the same size as it is at home, the basketball rim is still the same size, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go play the game that we know how to play.
You took Michigan to overtime one time. Tell me about that.
That was exciting. I'm from Detroit, and I coached high school basketball in that area, and I had an experience of being an assistant coach on an AAU team one time, so I knew some of the players. And Michigan was huge. I mean, they had a full scholarship program and a big school, and we had no scholarships, and they're coming on our home court. I knew the coach, et cetera, et cetera. And we were leading the whole game. This was really exciting, right down to the wire. And I knew one of the players on the Michigan team from coaching her in the AAU program in high school. And I knew her tendencies, because you have to realize we didn't have any film to look at. We didn't have any scouting ability to go out and scout the other teams we were playing in those years. We just had to show up and do what we could in the moment. But I had warned my players, we've got to cover her left side, because she does not shoot unless she puts the ball down at least one dribble with her left hand. So if she can't put the ball down, she's not going to shoot. When she shoots, though, she's going to make it. Unfortunately, they allowed her to shoot at as the clock went off, and she scored, took us into overtime, and we lost in overtime. But at least I was pretty pleased with the performance up to that point.
That sounds exciting. That sounds
it
like
was
a lot
exciting.
Of fun. So did you shake her hand after the game?
Of course. Of course.
Absolutely. So, let's see. You have a pretty interesting history with two very prominent names in sports. One is Gene Corrigan, and the other is Bob Rotella. What role did those two gentlemen play in your life and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, Gene left Virginia and came to Notre Dame I think that was about my 4th year there out of the 9 years that I was there. And he's just a wonderful person to work for. He is. I love Gene Corrigan and Lena, his wife. But he's just, I think a hallmark of Gene is that while he understands the bottom line, he also takes care of his athletes and his coaches because he understands that. He was an athlete and he was a coach. So he was always good to his people and encouraged us to perform to the best we could. And he was significant in the developing women's sport at Notre Dame because he was still coming in those early years, but he had the understanding of how important it was to support the women athletes and really made an effort to do that. So that was something that made an impression on me. I also was asked to chair the physical education department while Gene was there, and Gene was my supervisor in that. And I recall, I was coaching tennis, and I recall going to staff meetings on Monday mornings and was so glad to report that we had beat another Big Ten school because he really enjoyed beating a Big Ten school. So that was a lot of fun. And then towards the end of my career there, I had created this kind of 3-year plan to start saving some money and study from our GREs. I was planning on, leaving and coming to school here at Virginia. And Gene approached me about coming upstairs to be one of his assistant athletic directors. And so you typically don't tell your boss you're leaving in 3 years. It's a little more than the 2-week notice. But I was up front with him. I said, Gene, I really want to do this. Athletic administration is not my passion. Teaching and coaching is. So he said, you're going to leave Notre Dame? I said, yeah. And I said, I want to study sports psychology. What? And I said, well, I want to go to the University of Virginia. He went, oh. So he bought into that. So I did spend 1 year upstairs working with Gene. Almost changed my plan to stay a little longer because, as I said earlier, I admire the man so much and I could learn an awful lot from him. But 1 year, I stuck to my schedule, came to Charlottesville. 1 year later, he left Notre Dame to become the commissioner of the ACC. And now he and Lena live 7 miles down the road from me.
Oh.
So it's really a great outcome. And I chose Virginia primarily because of Bob Rotella. Bob had a sports psychology program, an applied sports psychology program, different from some other programs in the country that really emphasize academic research. So while we were doing research here, it wasn't the huge emphasis. Bob's work was going out and working hands-on with athletes. And that's what I wanted to do. My goals were not to be an academician and be at the university and do research. I wanted hands-on work with athletes. So that was the reason I came here and learned an awful lot from Bob.
So obviously you still are in contact with Mr. Corrigan. Do you still have contact with Mr. Rotella? I
don't see him that often. He spends half of his year down in Florida and only the other half here, so I really don't see Bob that often. I read his books, but that's all the stuff that we learned in class, and we see him actually on Earless Rabbit.
That's right.
And but I just don't have the opportunity to see him very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am very interested in this jersey, this number 12 jersey with your name on it. What is that?
Well, you may be familiar with the Pink Zone. Every February, the Women's Basketball Coaches Association instituted the Pink Zone to raise awareness and monies for breast cancer awareness, cancer research. And so every February, around mid-February, the women's collegiate teams dress up in some sort of pink, either a full uniform or possibly their shoes or headbands or whatever, to bring this awareness to breast cancer. Notre Dame does that. In their College of Science, they have a Cancer Research Institute, and the women's basketball program does dress up in pink and honor that, and they make a big to-do on a particular game in February. They also have a large fundraising effort to raise monies, and the last fundraising effort in addition to acknowledging all the people who have raised money and the doctors who are treating cancer patients and the folks that are doing the research, they have a luncheon right before that game. And I was very honored to be asked to be the keynote speaker at the luncheon this February of 2012.
There we go.
In 1983, I had my diagnosis and treatment in South Bend for breast cancer. So I'm a 29-year breast cancer survivor. So it was quite an honor, and the gift, one of the gifts they gave me was this framed jersey with my name on it. So that now hangs in my office, so anybody can stop by my office and see it firsthand.
That has to have a tremendous amount of meaning to you as a breast cancer survivor, a member of the University of Notre Dame, and to be honored like that had to have been a pretty moving experience.
It certainly was. I mean, to go back, I love the place. And another thing, when I went in, they have put an addition onto the basketball arena, and it's called the Purcell Pavilion. And in one of the hallways, they have this wallpaper with the photographs of all the basketball coaches in the history of the men and women's program. So up in one corner is a picture of me back in the day, and so that was kind of neat, because that was the first time I had seen that. And I was able to be there with two of my basketball players. Missy Conboy played basketball for me, and she's now the senior associate athletic director. She actually took my job. When I left to come to Charlottesville, she was hired, and she's been there all this 26 years. And one of her good buddies, Patty O'Brien, was also there, who played basketball for me. So we have our picture taken with the old picture and the new picture, and it was terribly exciting. The only down spot of the whole event was they lost the game to West Virginia, but it was just such a privilege and such an honor, and just bringing back memories. It was delightful.
Well, speaking of privileges and honors, I have to say that it was both for me to be able to sit down and speak with you today.
Well, thanks, Tom.
Really appreciate the time that you've spent with me. And I hope that we have an opportunity to do this again.
Absolutely.
So thank you
so
very
much. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
So.